In the city where the night seemed to hide unreachable secrets, a military police officer went out for just another routine patrol, never imagining that this night would change everything. He believed he had already seen it all, crimes, tragedies, injustices, but nothing could prepare him for the call he was about to receive. Because behind the uniform there was an emptiness 30 years old, an emptiness called mother. And on this night, fate decided to fill that silence with a revelation powerful enough to shatter even the strongest heart. The night had barely begun, and the weight of routine was already pressing down. The metallic click of the belt buckle, the holster fastened at his waist, the polished black boots, everything was part of a ritual that had long become automatic. Every detail mattered, because in the life of a police officer there was no room for mistakes. His name was André. At 37, his life was inseparable from the uniform he wore. Serving society was both a calling and a prison. A calling because protecting others gave him purpose. A prison because behind the image of strength and discipline lived a wound that had never healed. When he was just a child, André lost contact with his mother. No one explained it properly. Some whispered of abandonment, others of tragedies that never came to light. All André carried were fragments, a warm embrace on cold nights, a half-forgotten lullaby, and the emptiness of waking up one morning to find she was simply gone. He was raised by his father, a hard man who almost never spoke of the past. His mother's absence was forbidden territory, but that absence never stopped existing. On the contrary, it grew into the silent shadow that followed him on every patrol, every arrest, every lonely night in the squad car. Choosing the military career hadn't been an accident. Deep down, André believed that by imposing order on the world around him, he might also bring order to his own soul. But the void remained. Though respected by his colleagues and admired for his courage, André's inner world was filled with only one unrelenting question. Where is my mother? At the station, he was an example, disciplined, dependable, a man who never faltered. Yet in the solitude of the night patrols, hidden from the eyes of others, he allowed himself to wonder, is she alive? Does she ever think of me? Behind the armor of his uniform, he was still a lost boy, searching for answers. That particular night the city seemed heavier, its silence more ominous. The police radio crackled with calls. Petty theft, street arguments, suspicious noises echoing through forgotten alleys. André adjusted his vest and fixed his gaze on the red and blue lights, reflecting against the wet asphalt. To him it was just another shift. Another night where danger could be lurking anywhere. But what he didn't know was that this night, starting out like so many others, would soon become the most defining chapter of his entire existence. The early morning hours carried their usual tense monotony. The dashboard clock of the patrol car showed just past 2 a.m. when the radio crackled louder, shattering the silence that clung to the deserted streets. Unit 1245, copy. We've got a situation in the North Zone. Possible break-in at an abandoned property. Report indicates a vulnerable person on site. Request immediate response. The dispatcher's voice was steady and clipped, but there was something different this time. Something hidden between the lines, as if even she felt this call wasn't routine. André tightened his grip on the wheel, switched on the siren, and pressed down on the accelerator. The engine roared through the empty avenues, echoing against the dark, damp buildings of a city that never truly slept. His heart, usually steady in the face of danger, was beating harder. Maybe it was just another call, maybe. But somewhere deep inside, he felt something strange, like the air itself was warning him that tonight was different. As he approached the designated neighborhood, the streets grew narrower. the street lamps fewer and farther apart. Shadows thickened at the corners. A chill wind carried the scent of rot and neglect. Old houses with broken windows and peeling paint lined the way, each one a monument to forgotten lives. He parked the patrol car in front of a collapsing structure. The gate hung crooked on rusty hinges, squealing with each gust of wind. The front door stood ajar. From inside came a faint glow, too weak to be electric, more like a dying candle. André shut off the siren, leaving only the rotating lights of the squad car painting the walls red and blue. His right hand hovered near the holster, trained instinct guiding him, but his left hand trembled ever so slightly, a detail almost invisible, but one he couldn't deny. Stepping out, his boots echoed louder than he liked against the cracked pavement. "Police? Is anyone in there?" His voice cut into the night. At first only silence answered. Then came the faint scrape of feet dragging against the floor. Someone or something was inside. André drew in a deep breath and pushed forward. The hallway reeked of mold, the wooden floor creaking under his weight. The walls were tagged with faded graffiti, and here and there yellowed photographs still clung stubbornly, ghosts of a past life long abandoned. He followed the sound until he reached a room lit by a single candle balanced on a wooden crate. And there she was, a woman, sitting on the floor wrapped in a ragged blanket. Her hair was tangled, her eyes half closed with exhaustion and pain. She looked out of place, fragile, misplaced in time, as if life itself had exiled her. André froze. It wasn't fear that gripped him. It wasn't even the pity he often felt when finding someone lost and broken. It was something else, something unsettling, a strange familiarity. André held the flashlight steady, its beam cutting across the woman's face. She blinked several times, flinching at the light, as if her eyes had forgotten what brightness looked like. "Ma'am, are you all right?" His voice was firm, professional, but deep inside he felt an unease he couldn't explain. She took a long time to answer. Her cracked lips moved slowly, releasing a faint whisper. "I don't know." That response, so fragile, so uncertain, weighed heavier on him than the confession of any criminal. André stepped closer cautiously, his hand still near the holster out of instinct. But within seconds, he realized there was no threat here. What stood before him wasn't danger. It was pure vulnerability. The woman looked to be around 60, though the harsh lines on her face spoke of a life harder than her years. Her eyes, though tired, carried something strange, a glimmer that unsettled him. It wasn't recognition exactly, but it wasn't unfamiliar either. "Are you hurt? Is there anyone with you?" he pressed, softening his tone. She shook her head slowly. "No." The silence that followed was filled only by the distant drip of water somewhere in the house. André's radio crackled. He reported in Central. "This is Unit 12 to 45. Located a woman in vulnerable condition. We'll transport her for medical attention. Requesting support vehicle." As he waited, his eyes drifted back to her. The thin frame, the slumped shoulders, the old, frayed blanket barely keeping her warm. And then he noticed it, something small dangling against her chest. A pendant, a simple heart-shaped locket dulled by time, but still intact. André felt his stomach clench. That image pulled at something deep inside him, something buried beneath years of discipline and silence. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on the necklace. Etched into the metal, nearly worn away, were two faint letters, a +A. His breath caught. His gloved hands began to sweat. A+A, he remembered. As a child, he had seen it before, a necklace his mother used to wear. She told him it stood for Amour plus André, love and André, a symbol of their bond. Back then, it was his most treasured memory. That necklace. "Where did you get it?" His voice trembled despite his best effort to sound composed. Her fingers clutched it tightly, as if it were the last piece of her life she still owned. "It's from long ago. From someone I lost." Her answer was vague, but the sorrow in her voice was real, cutting deep. Andre's chest tightened. That wasn't just jewelry. It was a key, a door to memories he had tried to bury for 30 years. He forced himself to stay calm, but inside, his foundation was cracking. He couldn't look away from her face, from the tired eyes that mirrored something faint yet familiar. And for the first time in decades, the soldier within him faltered. Something told him this encounter was far more than just another night on patrol. The support unit was still minutes away. In that waiting silence, André remained by the woman's side. The candle flickered weakly on its crate, casting trembling shadows across the cracked walls. He tried to focus, to keep the moment professional, but every detail about her presence tugged at something buried deep within him. Memories he had worked hard to suppress seemed to stir at the edges of his mind. "Ma'am, do you have any family? Someone we can call?" His voice was calmer now, almost tender. She closed her eyes, searching for strength, before answering in a trembling whisper. "Family. I once had. I had a son, but—" Her words broke into silence, swallowed by a sob. André froze. His heart skipped a beat. 1,000 thoughts swarmed in his head, but none could quiet the single word echoing within him. Son. Before he could ask again, her hand moved instinctively to the pendant resting against her chest. The small heart-shaped locket swayed in the dim light. André leaned in closer. The engraving, though worn and almost erased by time, was still visible. A plus A. His pulse quickened. A plus A. He knew it too well. That necklace wasn't just familiar, it was personal. As a boy, he remembered his mother wearing one just like it, saying it meant Amour plus André. Love and André. The symbol of their bond. He swallowed hard, struggling to keep his composure. It could be a coincidence, it could. But everything inside him screamed otherwise. This necklace. "Where did you get it?" he asked, his voice uneven. Her eyes opened slowly, gazing at the locket as if it were both wound and lifeline. "It's from another time. From someone I lost," she murmured, her voice drenched in sorrow. André's throat tightened. This wasn't just a relic. It was a bridge, a fragile thread connecting him to a past he thought forever severed. The radio crackled again. "Support en route, ETA 2 minutes." André hardly heard it. His entire being was fixed on the fragile woman before him, on the locket, on the whispered fragments of her past. He stared at her face, wrinkled, weary, yet strangely familiar. In the lines of her expression, in the sadness of her eyes, he saw faint echoes of a photograph he had once clung to as a child. A smile long gone, a lullaby almost forgotten. A memory of arms that once held him. He couldn't admit it, not yet. But the walls around his heart were crumbling. This wasn't just another case. This was something far more personal, far more dangerous. And though his training screamed at him to stay focused, his soul whispered what he already feared. He was standing at the edge of a truth powerful enough to turn his entire life upside down. The wail of a siren drew near, then faded as a patrol car stopped outside the abandoned house. 2 fellow officers stepped inside, ready to take over. But André raised a hand, his expression sharp, his body language firm. "I'll handle this," he said quickly. The authority in his tone was enough. The others exchanged a glance and withdrew without a word. André turned back to the woman. "We'll get you to a hospital, ma'am. You need care," he said, helping her to her feet with surprising gentleness. The moment their hands touched, André felt it again, like a current jolting through his arm. Not the adrenaline of danger, but something deeper, something unsettlingly familiar. As they walked toward the door, Maria's voice cracked the silence. Fragments of broken sentences escaped her lips, fragments heavy with memory. I had to run. It wasn't safe. I had a boy once, André. My little André. André stopped dead in his tracks. The name, that name. The world around him fell away, the flickering candlelight, the creaking floor, even the faint voices of his colleagues outside. All that remained was the fragile sound of her calling him her little André. His knees nearly buckled. The hardened soldier who had faced armed criminals without flinching now felt his chest cave under the weight of a whisper. "What did you say?" His voice trembled. Her eyes, those weary, tear-filled eyes, lifted to meet his. And in that fleeting connection, something broke open. Recognition. "I never stopped thinking about you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "André, my son." It hit him like a bullet straight to the soul. 30 years of silence, 30 years of loneliness, 30 years of unanswered prayers, all shattered in a single fragile confession. His chest heaved, his breath shallow. He staggered back a step, gripping the doorframe as if the world itself had tilted. "No, it can't be," he muttered, voice raw. "My mother's name was Maria." Her hand trembled as she lifted the locket once more. The tiny heart caught the faint glow of the candle, the engraved letters glistening in the shadows. "This was all I had left of us," she whispered. "I never took it off. It was the only way to keep you close." André's defenses crumbled. His eyes flooded with tears he could no longer contain. The uniform, the armor of duty and discipline, meant nothing now. The woman before him wasn't just another case, another name in a report. She was the missing piece of his life, the echo of his childhood, the love he thought abandoned him. And in that moment, André knew he hadn't just found a stranger. Silence hung in the room, heavier than any sound. Maria's confession echoed in André's mind like a gunshot fired at point-blank range. He stood frozen, caught between two selves, the hardened officer and the abandoned child. 30 years. 30 years of unanswered questions. 30 years of growing up without the warmth of a mother's embrace. And now, in a single moment, the truth stood before him in flesh and blood. His throat tightened and his voice came out like a broken whisper. "Why? Why did you leave me? Where were you all this time?" Maria lowered her gaze, tears spilling as her fingers trembled around the locket. "I didn't want to. I never wanted to leave you. There were dangers, André, people who threatened us. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep you safe." Her words sliced through him. Part of him wanted to believe, but another part screamed in anguish. The officer who had spent years uncovering lies and half-truths demanded clarity. The son inside him just wanted a reason. "Do you know what it did to me?" His voice rose, raw and trembling. "I had to grow up alone. My father barely spoke of you. I spent my whole life not knowing if you were alive or dead. Do you understand what that did to me?" Tears blurred his vision. He had faced criminals without blinking, but now his chest burned with emotions he had buried for decades. Maria wept silently, each of his words striking her like a blade. "I dreamed of you," André continued, his voice cracking. "I dreamed of your arms around me. Every corner I turned, I hoped it would be you. And now, after 30 years, you just appear like this. Do you know how much that hurts?" Maria finally met his eyes. Her voice trembled, but carried the weight of a truth unshaken by time. "I thought of you every day, André. Every sunrise, every cold night. I prayed for you, hoped for you. I wasn't there, but I never stopped being your mother." Her words pierced through the fortress he had built. His knees weakened, his breath unsteady. The officer disappeared, leaving only the boy who had longed for those words his entire life. He buried his face in his hands, sobs shaking his frame. The man who had armored himself in duty, who had numbed his feelings with order and discipline, now wept openly. It was confusion. It was rage. It was joy. It was grief. A storm of everything he had carried for 30 years, breaking loose at once. Maria reached out, her trembling hand resting on his arm. He didn't pull away. The warmth of her touch, fragile as it was, carried something no training or discipline could resist. For the first time, André realized the battle wasn't out there in the streets tonight. It was inside his own heart. He had found his mother. For a moment, the world stood still. The police radio crackled faintly in the background. The candle flickered, and the patrol car's lights pulsed outside. But none of it mattered. For André, there was only her. The woman who had just spoken the words he had longed to hear for 30 years. Tears still streaked his face as an unbearable emptiness opened inside him. All his life, André had learned to master his emotions, to bury his pain beneath duty and discipline. But here, in front of her, that armor was crumbling into dust. He took a step closer, then froze. His hands trembled, his heart pounded against his ribs. The child in him ached to collapse into her arms, yet the man, hardened by absence, hesitated. Could he allow himself this moment? Then Maria broke the silence. Her voice was fragile, but it carried the undeniable strength of a mother's love. "Come here, my son. Let me hold you again." The words undid him. André closed his eyes, letting go of the soldier he had become. In 2 quick strides, he dropped to his knees before her and pulled her into his arms with a desperation that had been building for decades. Her body was frail, small, almost weightless in his embrace. But to André it was everything. 30 years of loneliness, 30 years of anger and longing dissolved as he clutched her tightly, as if he feared she might vanish again. Maria wept uncontrollably, her fingers combing through his hair the way she had once done when he was a child. "Forgive me, André. Forgive me," she repeated over and over, her words breaking under sobs. André's tears soaked his uniform. The officer was gone. Only the abandoned boy remained. The boy who had waited a lifetime for this embrace. He cried not just from pain, but from release. Each sob carried years of silence, of birthdays missed, of victories unshared, of questions unanswered, the candle extinguished with a whisper, leaving the room in near darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the squad car outside. But inside that embrace nothing was dark. It was as though the universe itself had bent to grant them this one miracle, the return of what had been stolen by time. When they finally pulled apart, their faces were wet with tears, but their eyes burned with a light neither had known in decades. André looked at her and saw not just a fragile woman, but the mother whose absence had shaped his entire existence. Maria gazed at him and saw not just a uniformed officer, but the boy she had loved and lost, now restored to her arms. That embrace hadn't erased the past. It hadn't erased the pain, but it was the first step toward healing wounds they both thought would never close. After the embrace that felt like it had stopped time, André helped Maria into a rickety chair against the wall. Her breathing was still uneven, broken by sobs, but her face carried a serenity that hadn't been there before. For the first time in decades, she no longer looked lost. She looked like a mother who had found her son. André wiped his face with his sleeve, trying to compose himself. He needed answers. The officer in him demanded them, while the son inside him simply wanted to listen. "Tell me," he said softly, his voice trembling. "What happened? Why did you leave me?" Maria drew in a shaky breath. Her eyes, still wet with tears, seemed to wander back into a past she had spent years trying to bury. "I never wanted to leave you, André. You were everything to me. But there was danger, real danger. I was trapped in a violent relationship with a man who swore that if I didn't disappear, he would harm you. I thought leaving was the only way to protect your life. Her words struck him like lightning. Part of him wanted to reject the explanation, to hold on to the anger that had fueled him for so long. But another part understood too well. He had seen countless families destroyed by violence and fear in his years on the force. I tried to find you, Maria continued, her voice breaking, but your father took you far away. There were no records, no trace. I was just a broken woman, powerless, with no means to fight back. Time passed, and all I had left was this locket. It was the only way I could still hold on to you. André's eyes fell on the small pendant again. Memories rushed back, nights as a boy, trying to remember her face, whispering her name like a prayer, wondering if she still loved him. I grew up believing you'd forgotten me, he confessed, his voice raw, that I wasn't worth staying for. Maria's trembling hands reached for his face, cupping it with tenderness. You were my reason, André, every single day. Every moment of absence was torture. I wasn't there, but I never stopped loving you. Her words pierced him. Sweet, because they revealed he had always been loved. Bitter, because they reminded him of everything he had lost. Birthdays without her. Milestones unshared. Triumphs lived alone. Yet in that cold, broken room, something stronger than pain began to stir. Hope. He gripped her hands tightly, anchoring himself to the truth of her presence. We can't change the past, Mother, but the present. Maybe we can write a new story together. Maria smiled through her tears. For the first time in 30 years, she felt like a mother again. And in that moment, the gulf of decades began to close. The night was slipping away, and the first traces of dawn painted the horizon in faint gray. Outside, André's fellow officers lingered by the patrol car, giving him space without asking questions. They could sense this was no ordinary case. Inside the crumbling house, mother and son sat together, bound by a silence that no longer felt strange. It was heavy, yes, but it carried meaning. For the first time, André wasn't staring at a void. He was staring at the face that had haunted his memories for 3 decades. He leaned back against the peeling wall, running a hand across his forehead. His eyes drifted down to his calloused hands, then back to Maria. You know, he began, his voice low, more like a confession than a statement. I used to think your absence had destroyed me. I spent my whole life trying to understand why you weren't there. I carried so much anger, so much emptiness. His throat tightened, but he pressed on. That anger pushed me to the police force. I thought if I could control the chaos outside, maybe I could control the chaos inside me. But the truth is, I was just a boy trying to protect himself from pain. Maria listened, her tears falling silently. Every word he spoke was like a mirror showing her the scars her absence had left behind. Every arrest I made, every injustice I saw. André's voice wavered. I wondered if you were out there somewhere, swallowed by the same darkness. It tore at me. He looked up at her then, his eyes wet but sharp with truth. Your absence made me hard, cold, even in moments of joy. Graduating from the academy, earning my promotions, I felt incomplete. Because you weren't there. Maria's lips trembled. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the unbearable weight of his words. If I could go back, I would do it all differently. You didn't deserve that pain. You didn't deserve to grow up alone. André shook his head gently, his tears spilling over. But you know what? That pain shaped me. It gave me discipline. It gave me strength when I wanted to fall apart. Maybe I wouldn't be who I am without it. Maybe the uniform, the man I've become, was forged out of that loss. He moved closer and placed his hand over hers, steady but tender. The pain made me a soldier, but finding you, Finding you is giving me back the son I never stopped being. Maria broke into sobs, clutching his hand tightly as if trying to hold on to 30 stolen years all at once. For the first time in decades, André felt lighter. The weight of history still rested on his shoulders, but it was no longer a chain. It was a reminder, proof that even pain could be transformed when destiny rewrote the story. The horizon slowly shifted from grey to the pale blue of dawn. Outside, the city was beginning to stir, unaware that inside a crumbling house, a miracle had just unfolded. André guided Maria out carefully, steadying her frail body with his strong arm. Each step felt symbolic, mother and son crossing not just a threshold, but the chasm of 30 years of separation. The patrol car waited at the curb, its lights casting soft glows against the broken walls. For André, that vehicle had always meant duty, order, survival. But today it was something more. Today it was the vessel carrying him back to what he had long lost, home. Maria leaned her head against his shoulder as they drove. The contrast was striking, her fragile body against his armored uniform. Yet beneath the surface they were the same, two wounded souls, finally stitched together by fate. "God never abandoned me," Maria whispered, her voice thin but steady. "He just waited for the right moment to bring us back together." André closed his eyes. Memories of lonely nights, of whispered prayers, of wondering if she was alive, all of it collided in him at once. Perhaps the silence of heaven had not been abandonment, but preparation. They couldn't recover what had been lost. The birthdays, the milestones, the countless moments of life lived apart. But what they did have was something far greater, a second chance. When they arrived at the hospital, André helped her out of the car. His colleagues stood back, silent, sensing that this was no ordinary case but something sacred. Inside the hospital room, as Maria received care, André remained by her side, not as a police officer, not as a man in uniform, but as a son who had been found again. And in that moment, he realized something profound. His life had been built on protecting strangers, on chasing justice, on being the unshakable soldier. But his greatest mission wasn't written in the codes of law or duty. It was written in blood, in memory, in the quiet resilience of love. Destiny had torn them apart for 30 years. And destiny, on a quiet, forgotten night, had brought them back together. André understood now. Some stories don't end in absence. They wait, patiently, painfully, for the right moment to be rewritten. And this was his moment. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video. It helps more people discover powerful reunions like this one. Subscribe to Life Reunions and turn on the bell, so you never miss the next incredible true story of family, love, and fate. And now, tell me in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? It will be amazing to see how far these reunion stories reach around the world.